All these voices. All these voices. All these things you can't explain. All these painful memories. They keep haunting you and daunting me. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoking gasoline. It's just a ghost of you and me. Of you and me. All these whispers. All these footsteps in the rain. All these shadows in my mind. With my reflection I can't find. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoking gasoline. It's just a ghost of you and me. Of you and me. Don't let them take you away. Don't let them bring you down inside. It's just the mirrors in your mind. Don't let them bring you down.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. I am your host, horror author James Hershey Jr., and with me, as always, is my co-host, Old Boy James Ash. How you doing, brother?
Pretty good. What is up, misfits, sugar ladies, and demon hunters? I'm pretty good there, brother. Kind of getting late, though.
Tonight's show is going to be pretty cool. Tonight we are going to be talking about the granddaddy of all the cryptids, the one and only Bigfoot. Now, whether you call him Bigfoot or Sasquatch or skunk ape or abominable snowman or yeti or whatever you call it, each culture has their own version and their own name, but it's all pretty much the same creature or the same variation of the creature. We're going to do things a little bit differently tonight. Usually I would go into all the lore and we do the complete history of whatever thing we're talking about, but with Bigfoot, it's everybody kind of knows what Bigfoot is. I don't really have to spend a lot of time, educating and going through all the history so you know what we're talking about. Everybody knows Bigfoot. So I thought instead today what we would do is we would talk about some of the very best evidence of Bigfoot. Because Bigfoot is something that you either believe in or you don't. There's not much middle ground. Either you're one of the people that says, yes, absolutely, Bigfoot is real, and I believe 100%, or you're one of those people that says, oh, it's a bunch of bull, it's nothing but a hoax, and you just don't believe it all. Usually it falls within those two categories. Now, you have a couple pieces of evidence, or I guess you would say categories of evidence, that really make Bigfoot possible, the whole idea. You have video evidence, which you have a couple pieces of film that are really, really good. And then you have a lot of your hoaxy kind of stuff. But the first one I want to talk about is probably the most famous one, the Patterson-Gilman footage. Now, this footage is the one that everybody will recognize when they see it. It's the famous shot of a female Bigfoot walking through an area, and it turns back and looks at the camera and then walks on. It was shot in 1967, and so far, in my opinion, it is the absolute best piece of evidence we have of Bigfoot, the best film we have of Bigfoot. Now, there's been people that have said that it's a hoax. There's been people that have said, well, this person or that person said it was a hoax. They admitted it and all this. And, I don't put much stock in all that. Because when I look at the Patterson-Gilman footage, what I see is a biological creature. I don't see a man in a suit. Okay? Let's start with that part right there. the idea that this is somehow a man that is wearing a Bigfoot suit, a costume. You hear that a lot. Now remember, this is 1967. Okay, let's look at, during that time period, let's look at the absolute best special effects that they could do. And let's even look at the best special effects they could do when it concerns primates. Okay? Let's look at something like Planet of the Apes. Now, in Planet of the Apes, you can obviously tell that it is a costume. You don't have individual muscle movements taking place underneath of the fur. You do not have dermal ridges on the feet or the hands. You don't have these things, okay? In the Patterson-Gilman film, you have, as the Sasquatch is walking away, if you watch the back of the animal, okay, focus around right underneath the shoulder blade area, you can see the individual muscles of the back moving, contracting and expanding as the creature moves. Now, if you look at the creature's legs, when you look at the knee, when the creature is walking, you can see how the knee joint works. Okay, it's not just a straight back and forth like a man's. It almost has a circular movement to it. Not a complete circle, but as the step is taken, the knee kind of goes out and then back in like a half circle shape. Okay, it's got a little bit of a swing to it. That is unique to primates. Human beings do not walk that way, but primates do. So in Bigfoot, we have a creature that is not going to have the same physiology that we do. Okay, it's going to more closely resemble a primate. So to me, that is a very, very huge piece of evidence. When you watch the way this creature walks, a human being cannot walk that way. Our knees do not work like that. Okay, when we walk, it's a straight back and forth. There's a bending of the knee, it rises, it comes back down, it's straight back and forth. There's no circular motion there. Now also, as the creature raises its foot, there's a point in the Patterson-Gilman footage where you can see the bottom of the creature's foot. And you can make out that there are dermal ridges there. Now, most people didn't even know about dermal ridges back then. Everybody knew about fingerprints, but primates have a very specific set of dermal ridges that run across the bottom of their feet that are a lot like our fingerprints. And that was almost unknown, with the exception of you know, some very educated zoologists and primate specialists. Those were the only people that knew about that back then. The average person would have no idea that there were dermal ridges on the bottom of a primate's foot. So that would not be incorporated into the costume, especially something that you literally only see for 1 or 2 frames of the entire film. They wouldn't put that kind of detail into a costume because nobody would notice it unless they slowed the damn thing down and watched it frame by frame. So that's another huge piece of evidence that tells me that this film is real. Now, when you look at the special effects of the time, they were not capable of making a suit that would show off the muscle movements in the back. They were not capable of creating a special effect that would enable an actor wearing the suit to be able to walk in a different way that is completely alien to the way a human walks. It's not believable. Right now, 2017, they are not capable of making a suit that has individual muscle movements that are anatomically correct like that. Anytime you see stuff like that in a movie, it's done with CGI. It's not a physical special effect. Because they can do it with robotics and stuff like that, but they can't make it believable like that. They can't make it look that way, the way it appears naturally. And this was done in 1967. This footage was shot. So to me, that tells me right there that this is a real creature we're seeing on this film. Now, whoever says it's fake or whoever says it's not fake, I don't care what they have to say. I don't even care if the guy who made the film said it was fake. Because there's no way in hell you can fake that. And the video evidence is right there to see. Okay, there's another piece of footage, and I apologize, I do not know who shot the footage. I couldn't find that information, but there's a piece of footage where a family is out, like, I don't know if it's a picnic or just a little get-together kind of thing they're doing, and they're filming them, and then they turn and they're filming this field, and at the end of this field is this ridge line, and you see this Sasquatch go running and just tearing across this land, and I mean, he is moving, and it's a really good piece of footage as well. Well, there was a group of scientists that saw this footage, and they decided that they wanted to try to recreate it. So what they did was they went to the location of the filming, and they figured out the spot where the people were filming by the angles and you know, the things that were seen in the footage, and they were able to figure out that the creature was over 9 foot tall by the footage and the natural landmarks. And then they decided, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to try to figure out if it's possible for a human being to cover that kind of distance in the short amount of time that it took the Sasquatch to cover it. And that'll help us decide whether this was a person in a suit or whether it was an actual human, you know, an actual creature that was running. So they decided, instead of just getting some random run-of-the-mill ordinary guy to run, they would go out and get a professional runner, somebody who was a, you know, collegiate level, Olympic level kind of sprinter kind of guy. One of these guys that runs faster than any of us do. So they got one of these guys, and they set him up at the point where the creature enters the frame, and they had him run the length that the creature ran before it went out of the frame. And they timed him, and he ran it over and over and over again. And he never got close to the time that the creature set. I mean, he was off by a lot. He could not run that terrain in the kind of time the creature did. He was way too slow. And this is one of the fastest people on the planet. And he couldn't do it. So what that tells me is that there's no way that a human being in a costume could have covered that distance. I mean, first of all, somebody that's going to be faking something like this, they're not going to go out and get an Olympic sprinter to fake being Bigfoot. It's going to be some guy, you know, just whoever the hell's filming it, one of his buddies is going to be Bigfoot in the film. So they're just going to get some random guy, they're going to throw a costume on him, which is going to be a suit, which is going to make it harder for him to see, harder for him to move. And then they're going to have this guy run across the area and pretend he's Bigfoot, if it's a hoax. Now, there's no way an ordinary guy wearing a Bigfoot suit that's going to make it harder for him to see and harder for him to move, there's no way that guy is going to run that distance faster than an Olympic sprinter. It's just not going to happen. I mean, the sprinter is going to blow him away every single time. But that's not what happened when they tried to recreate it. The sprinter couldn't get close to the guy's time, or the Bigfoot's time, I'm sorry. They couldn't get close. So I think that's another very good piece of evidence that shows that these things are real, and that piece of footage was real. Now, I want to get off the footage, and I want to talk about something else that is always put forth as evidence of Bigfoot, and that is the castings made of the footprints. Now, basically what happens is somebody will come across a footprint, and they will take plaster of Paris and they'll pour into the footprint. They will allow it to dry, and it'll form that big white foot that everybody sees when they show the footprints. And basically what that does is it just fills the space. and gives you the shape. But what it also does is it takes the imprint of whatever is on the ground when you fill it. So if, let's say I walk through there and I'm wearing boots. If I pour plaster of Paris into the tracks that I leave, I am going to get the tread pattern of my boot in the track. And it will be transferred into the plaster of Paris mold that is made of the track. Now, when you look at these molds that are made from the Bigfoot tracks, you see a couple things. One, the depth of the track tells you that it's not a normal human being that's making this track, because the track is deeper than what a human track would be. That is because of the immense weight of the Bigfoot. These things are anywhere from 9 to 12 feet tall and anywhere from 4 to 700 or 800 pounds. So that puts a lot more downward pressure on the ground as the foot comes down. There's a lot more pressure there, so it goes deeper than a human print goes. You can see that in the thickness of the mold that is made. Another thing you can see is when you take one of these plaster of Paris tracks and you turn it over after it dries, what you'll see on the bottom of it is dermal ridges. Now, if you look at your fingers and you look at your fingerprints, you see the pattern. Primates have a specific pattern of dermal ridges that is on their feet that is unique to primates. A human foot does not have the same pattern that a primate foot has. So when you see these dermal ridges on the bottom of a plaster of Paris mold that's made of a Bigfoot track, what that tells you is, one, that it is a definite real track from a primate. Because the only way you're going to be able to duplicate the dermal ridges of a primate is if you are an expert in primates. And not only just an expert in primates, because there's a lot of people that study primates for a living that are experts that have no idea what the dermal ridges look like on a primate's foot. You have to be an expert in not only primate, but you have to be an expert in the dermal ridges of a primate's foot. Now, believe it or not, there are a few people in the world that are experts in that. And these people have examined the plaster of Paris molds that are made from the Bigfoot tracks. And they have all stated that the dermal ridges that they see on these tracks are 100% primate dermal ridges. Okay? So that is 100% verifiable. It is real. So we know that these tracks are made by an actual biological creature. They're not hoaxes. Now, I'm not saying every single track is not a hoax, but every track that has the dermal ridges that match primate are 100% real. Now, not only does that tell you that there's an actual creature out there that's leaving these tracks, but it also tells us something very, very interesting, and I think very crucial to understanding just what the hell Bigfoot is. It tells you that whatever this creature is, it's in the primate family. It is a primate. So that tells you that Bigfoot is a primate of some sort, because only a primate would be able to leave dermal ridges that match the dermal ridges of another primate. We can't do it as humans. There's some theories that Bigfoot might be an alien. I would say most likely an alien is not going to be able to have the same dermal ridges as a primate. It's just not believable. It's not going to happen. So that tells you that Bigfoot is a primate of some sort. Now, that leads me to what I think Bigfoot is. And it's also a theory that a lot of people have, but it's one that I happen to agree with. I believe that Bigfoot is actually Gigantopithecus, which is an early ancestor of human. It's another form. Like we had, like you have us, Homo sapiens. you had Neanderthal man, you had Cro-Magnon man, you had a bunch of different kind of early humans. You even had little hobbits that were existed on Earth at one time. There was a bunch of different species of humans and humans and primates that were around long ago. Now, Gigantopithecus was one of these relatives, and what Gigantopithecus was an early primate that ranged between 9 and 12 feet tall. It weighed basically the same as the Bigfoot weighs, in between 4 and 8 or 900 pounds. It was completely covered in fur, just like the Bigfoot is. And it matches in almost every way the description of the modern Bigfoot, what we all know Bigfoot to be. It matches 100%. Now, Gigantopithecus began its life primarily in Asia. It was mostly China, but it was also found in India and Vietnam. Now, you might say, well, if it's a creature from China, then why the hell are there Bigfoot in America? And that's a fair question. But there's a very easy answer to that. The reason there are Bigfoot in America, if they came from China originally, is the same reason that there are people in America. Because, see, the people came to America from Asia on the Bering Land Bridge. At one time, there was a piece of land that connected North America to Asia. Okay, it was called the Bering Land Bridge. And that is where our ancestors made their way across to get here. There's no reason why the Gigantopithecus couldn't have done the exact same thing as we did. They could have easily traveled across that exact same land bridge and populated this country as well, the same way we did. Well, not all of us. A lot of us came from Europe and other places. The Native Americans did. Let's put it that way. I'm part Native American, so I guess I can say that. But that's how people got here, was they crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Asia to get to America. And the Gigantopithecus could have done the exact same thing very easily. And it's not the only species that did that. There's a lot of species that crossed that land bridge that came to America that weren't native to here before. So that's a very easy explanation to how this creature got here. It also spread all over the world. Pretty much every continent has their own legends of Bigfoot. I guess you could say Antarctica, not really, because there's not really people there to have legends, but there have been stories that there were Bigfoots at one time in Antarctica as well. I'll let old boy get into that later. But pretty much every society, every group of people has their own legends and lore about Bigfoot. Some people call it Bigfoot. Some people call it the Yowie. Some people call it, the Abominable Snowman. Some people call it Yeti. There's all kinds of different names for it. But it's all basically the same creature, just adapted a little bit differently for that environment, which makes 100% sense. Because if you have the same species of animal and you take part of that species and you put it on an island somewhere with a different environment, eventually it's going to change to that environment. And I mean, we've seen that in a bunch of different snake species. We've seen it in species of birds that are in different areas. They adapt differently, they evolve differently. So it makes sense that there would be different kinds of Bigfoots based on where they are in the world and what their environment is like, what the weather is like, what the conditions are like. So that's what I think that Bigfoot actually is. I think it's a Gigantopithecus that crossed over the Bering Land Bridge, and that's how it got here. And from Asia, it could spread all throughout Europe. It could spread everywhere. You know what I mean? Because remember, at one time, the continents were a lot closer together than they are now, and they were connected. So there's no reason why it couldn't have traveled wherever the hell it wanted to, because this thing comes from way, way back. Now, you might say, well, James, the only problem with your theory is that Gigantopithecus is extinct. It's been extinct for a hell of a long time. Well, I would say not so fast. Because there's been a lot of cases of things that go back even further that are still here. You know? I mean, you look at something like the alligator, the crocodile, a lot of species of shark, they go all the way back to the time of the dinosaurs, and they're still here. You know, you have insects that were around in the time of dinosaurs, they're around now. So it's not unheard of for creatures to still exist now that existed even before Gigantopithecus. Another thing I would say about that is, just because scientists say that it went extinct so many years ago or so many millions of years ago or whatever, it doesn't really matter what scientists say, because they thought that the coelacanth was extinct until one washed up on the coast of Madagascar. They thought that that creature had been extinct for millions of years. And then all of a sudden they figure out, oh wait, look, here it is. It's not extinct, it's right there. So I guess it didn't go extinct. I mean, they don't really know what the hell they're talking about in a lot of cases. It's all guesswork. You know, I've said before on this show, you can't say that something doesn't exist unless you've looked everywhere on the planet for it. Every square inch of this planet has been searched, and then you can say, okay, we looked everywhere and it's nowhere. It's not here anymore. But until you look every single place, you can't really say that something is extinct. You can say you think it might be extinct, but there's been several cases where scientists have said something was extinct and then they find out that it's not. So just because they say, well, Gigantopithecus went extinct a long time ago, that doesn't mean it's true. You know, they said that that little hobbit species that I talked about earlier in the show, they said that that went extinct way back before modern man was even a thing. That's what they said. And then they came across this island, and lo and behold, they find bodies on the island that tell us, well, damn, this thing existed all the way up to the 1800s. There was little hobbits that still existed on Earth all the way up until the 1800s. And they said, well, I guess it went extinct then. But it might still be around somewhere, and we just don't know it. You know what I mean? So don't be so quick to, just because you read in a book somewhere that says that Gigantopithecus went extinct so long ago, and there's no possible way that it could be Bigfoot because they don't exist anymore. Don't listen to that, because they don't know. And I know that sounds crazy to say that scientists don't know what the hell they're talking about, but I think it's proven time and time again. You know, most science is theory. That's what a lot of people don't understand about science, is it's only theory. There's very few laws in science. You have the law of gravity, you have things like that, but the majority of science is just theory. It's just a hypothesis. And theories are proven wrong all the time. I mean, evolution is a theory. It's taught in school like it's law, like it's fact, but it's just a theory. In all reality, we don't really have a missing link. We've never found the connection between primate and human. It doesn't exist in the fossil record. There's nothing that links us, but yet it's taught that way in school. And the reality is really something completely different. So I don't put a lot of stock into just because a scientist says something that is true, because they're proven wrong all the time. So that's a little bit of the evidence of Sasquatch. And I'm going to throw over to Old Boy, and I'm going to let him talk a little bit about it. And then a little bit later on in the show, I'm going to tell you the story of when I believe I actually saw a Bigfoot for myself. So that'll be interesting. But for now, let's go over to Old Boy.
Thank you, brother. Well, there's plenty of different creatures in different places, and they all have different names. Like, you know, the Bigfoot in Canada and the United States is Bigfoot. In Texas, there's a Bigfoot, but it's supposed to be more mean and not as big. They're about 6 to 7 feet tall. 6.5, 7 feet, 7.5. There's the skunk ape in Florida area. The abominable snowman, Nepal, Pakistan, China, Russia, Mongolia, India, the Himalayas. especially 21,000 feet. I'm going to talk about the Yeti. The Yeti is supposed to be their version of Bigfoot, but it's a little bit different. It whistles. It also uses weapons, like stone weapons. Like, yeah, he was getting into it's with the ape family, and that's something that, you know, we did when we were primates back in, you know, millions of years ago or whatever you believe we came. They used stone weapons. They actually have in the Himalayas, in one of these temples with the monks, they actually had a hand. It was a skeleton arm, and it was really weird because they did a test on it. What happened is the guy wanted to see it, and they finally let him see it. Well, back in those days, he did something sneaky. He had another skeleton of a human finger, and he replaced it and took the abominable snowman Yeti finger off and had it analyzed, and they said it was not human. And they also have a scalp of a Yeti in one of these temples there. They they have looked at it, and it's a scalp. It's really weird. It's like a scalp, and they've done stuff on it on the snowman. They said they don't know if it was human, if it's fake or not. But they actually have a case. I'm looking at it right now. God, it's crazy. It looks like a hat, but it's a scalp of the Yeti. Wow, that's pretty weird. That's pretty crazy. Basically, with this creature has always been one of my favorites because I really believe this thing exists. The Yeti, the Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it, the Yowie in China. And it's always intrigued me because I really believe, you know, it's a real thing. And I have my opinions. I think that they may be an ancestor to us. I don't know. Or or alien. That's another one a lot of people have a theory on. The giant pithecus. I'm not even going to try to say the word. James talked about them earlier. I think they might be an ancestor of them, but they're not as big because those things ran up to 9 to 13 feet tall. These in between 6 to 7, 9 is pretty much the basic size, and over is 6 to 1,000 pounds. Now the Patterson video, back to that when he was talking to it about that was a female supposedly in between the size of 7'7" to 7'9", weighing about 700-800 pounds. And there's a theory on that, you know, like one guy said that I guess he wasn't they left his name out of it. I guess he was involved in that whole thing. Claimed that he was wearing the suit. He supposedly was 6'2.5", 6'3", and he could kind of walk like that. But they have done studies where this thing was over 7 feet, 7 feet 7 to 7'9", 7'10", around there, and it weighed over 600 to 700 pounds. And the way it walked, like James was saying, a human can't turn that way or walk. And it was walking at a stride that a human can't walk. And for that day in the 60s especially, it was almost impossible to make that suit. You would have known it was fake back then. It wouldn't have made any sense. It would have looked really stupid and generic. Look at the movies they made in the 60s. And it would have looked really stupid, like, you know, you would know it's fake. And even with the Planet of the Apes, like he said, they were wearing uniforms. You could barely... They did a good job back then, but you could still tell it was fake. This thing isn't fake. I watched the Patterson video earlier for almost 4 minutes, and you look at this thing, I think you're looking at a real Bigfoot, and it's breathtaking to know that that's real, and to see something like that. And it's a female because you can see it has breast. And the way it's walking. And if you also see, there's also pictures where they show some in the background. People don't get this. There might be more. Couple in the background in the woods. So it's a really interesting video. I think it's real. I believe that Bigfoot does exist. They've been talking about this creature for thousands of years. And it started, I think, in China and Mongolia, like he was saying. But the thing about this is the odds of this being real is not impossible. And because there's been 2.5 million sightings. And that's incredible. Because it's not just like 10, 20 people saw it. Millions of people have seen this thing in different parts of in the world, the country, wherever. And it's almost impossible. Just like it's almost impossible we're the only creatures in the world, anywhere in space. There's so many planets, the odds of that is impossible. The odds of over millions of people seeing something and it's being fake, it's true, there's probably plenty of people who lied and said something, but the odds and the number, there's at least, if you just even take 10% of 2 million, 200,000 people have seen this thing for real. So that's amazing. And I think what we're seeing in the Patterson video is real. And I think that we need to really look back in our history and realize these things exist. They did exist 1,500 years ago, but they were a lot bigger 15,000 years ago. The Gigantopithecus, sorry, finally got it, was a real creature. It killed us. They said it used to hunt humans, or what we were, primates or whatever. They were giant apes. They were huge. Like James said, 9 to 12, or actually some of them I was reading get to 18 feet tall and weigh a ton. They were huge. And these things actually, probably we were killed by these things, they said. The primates were. So, dude, I really believe, and this has always been, like I said, one of my favorite stories, because I actually think this creature does exist. And I would say probably a 99% chance this thing's real. I mean, just with the footprints they find, I know people have fake footprints and got, the fake prints and walked around for days, and they've proven that. But they've actually found real, with hair, they can't explain what it is. Unknown. And then some actually come with an ape. Well, what kind of ape's running around America and Canada that can throw rocks, whistle, and think, and they're really, supposedly smarter than us? So, I mean, that's the other thing about this. They might be. That's why they haven't been caught. And they said, well, that's impossible. There's never no bones or nothing. Well, some animals, when they're going to die, go deep down in the forest and find a place where no one will find them so they can die, and they do. And bears are known to do this. That's why a lot of people don't find a lot of dead bears, because when they know they're going to die, they'll find a place exclusive away from things so they can just go and die. So do lions and a couple other animals do this. And mammals, because this is not an animal, it's a mammal. And that might explain why we don't find bones. Because the thing is probably very smart, and it doesn't want to be seen. And if you do see it, there's probably a reason why. And they're used to human beings. I don't think they attack us like they say on TV. I think that's a bunch of crap. It irritates me when people want to hunt them, because I think they're beautiful animals. Mammals, sorry. I won't even call them animals. They're mammals. And anybody who wants to kill one of these things pisses me off. I know there's supposedly in Texas, they're supposed to be like crazy and they try to kill you. So that's a little bit different. They're like 7 feet tall. They're supposed to be inbred. That's why they're so crazy. That's just a crazy ape. But I don't think they're the same creature. I think there's different creatures, like the skunk ape. I think that's it looks like a orangutan. It's 7 feet tall. I think it's a different breed. And I think there's different breeds, like the Yeti, the Yowie. I think it's all different kind of creatures, just like us, how we had different ancestors. Small, big, like he was saying, the Hobbit. You have, midgets, little people, sorry. Don't mean to offend anybody. I think that it's the same kind of thing. And in China, they had the wild man. and he's supposedly 5 to 6 feet tall, and he's supposed to be a primate that runs around. It's golden or yellowish, and that's a real weird story too. And then there's just so many of these apes, different creatures that's running around. I think it's more. They might all have different names because different languages, but I think they're all probably from the same ancestry, but I think they're different. I think they're from different primates, and they just do different things. Like the Yeti does different things than the Bigfoot does. It whistles. It uses weapons. Where Bigfoot tries to, run away, he'll stare at you, but he'll take off. But he'll come back. In Canada, especially, they had this thing I watched on TV. They did a show, and I think it was searching for Sasquatch, but they were all hiding in this cabin, and like they were getting rocks and stuff thrown at them. And these things knew what they were doing because they're very smart. There's an island in Canada. I was watching it one day, and they were messing with these people, and they're not stupid. And that's what people need to realize. Like they're probably smarter than us, or on the same level, and they know how to mess with you. And I've heard they've attacked people, and I really have my opinions on that. I think it was more a curiosity, and maybe one was bad. There's always bad things in everything, like bears and everything. But I think it was more of a curiosity, and I think people exaggerate things and lie too, and want to make things bigger than it is, and we all know how that goes. But that's what my opinion is on all this. And there's findings that's all over the world, even Antarctica in some places. There's been rumors of it being there. So it's been almost every country, like James was saying. It's always been a great story, one of my favorites. And we'll get back to James so he can tell the story about how he ran into the Bigfoot there in the woods.
One thing I'd like to talk about real quick before I tell the story is I want to touch on what Old Boy was saying about why you never find bodies, why you never find, skeletons or whatever like that in the forest of this creature. We all know that bears exist. I think we can all agree on that, correct? We all can sit there and look at each other and say, bears absolutely exist. There's no doubt in my mind or anybody else's mind they are real creatures that exist. Now, I live in the mountains. I've been face to face with a bear. I mean, literally a foot away 3 times in my life. I am always out hunting. I'm always out in the woods. I have never one time in my life run across a bear carcass or any bare bones. Okay? We can all agree that deer exist. Not only do they exist, but they're extremely tasty, I think. I hunt them all the time. I have never one time ran across deer bones in the woods. The reason why in a forest you never find bones and bodies is because a forest, not only is it full of scavengers, but it's also full of insects that will eat you up pretty quick. And the conditions of a forest, it's usually wet. And it's designed to decompose things quickly. If you have a body that's in the forest, in a matter of a week or two, there's no trace of it anymore. Because scavengers come along, the birds, coyotes, small scavengers, they come along and they rip the thing apart, whatever it is, and they scatter it all over the place. They eat the food, like the meat, and they crack open the bones. They take the marrow from the bones. So you're left with bone fragments, broken pieces of bone, and everything else is consumed. And it doesn't take very long for the bones themselves to decompose in a wet environment of a forest. That's why you never see bear skeletons. That's why you never see deer skeletons. Now, you will find deer antlers. You will find those once in a while. If you're there at the exact right time, you'll find them. There's only a window of a week or two where you can actually find antlers in the woods. The reason for that is because the bucks will actually shed their antlers. They'll just drop off. Now, you're not going to have scavengers that are going to come along and eat antlers. It's just not going to happen. They're not attached anymore to an actual animal, so there's nothing for the scavenger to eat. So you will have the antler that'll be there in the woods that you can walk along and find if you get there right after it drops off, within a week. Sometimes 2 if you're lucky, but most times it's a week that you'll be able to find the antler. But if you wait any longer than that, they're gone. It doesn't take very long for things to decompose in the woods. That's why you're never going to find, unless you're extremely lucky, you're never going to find a Sasquatch corpse or bones or anything like that. Because when this thing dies, now this is assuming that they have absolutely no sense of community, that they don't bury their dead or do something with their dead. This is just assuming that it is an animal that dies and is just going to be laying there. Something as large as a Sasquatch, the argument is you'd be able to find traces of it when it dies. But that's not true, because scavengers are going to come along and tear it to pieces. And within a day or two, there's not going to be anything but bones left. And the bones are going to be broken apart, so that, especially when you're dealing in situations with wolves and with coyotes, those bones are going to be chewed up and broken apart so that they can get to the marrow inside of them. And once they're broken apart like that and exposed to air and to the elements, it doesn't take very long. Because insects do a number even on the bones. You know, they eat through all that stuff fairly quickly, believe it or not. So that, I believe, is why you don't find the bodies or the skeletons left behind. The same reason you don't find bear, you don't find deer, you don't find any of that stuff. You know, because that environment is not conducive to preserving a body for very long. Everything decomposes there. Everything. So that I wanted to get to. I wanted to answer that and give a really good reason from my experience of being out in the woods. Now to the story of when I myself saw with my very own eyes what I believe to be a Bigfoot. This happened several years ago when I was younger. And at that time, I was a smoker. And I smoked a little bit over 2 packs a day. So I smoked a whole lot. But I tried not to smoke in my house if I could help it, because I did not want my walls to be yellow. It made the place stink. You know, if I had somebody that came over to my house who was not a smoker, then, you know, they would always turn up their nose at the smell of smoke. They didn't like it. You know, as you know, for people that don't smoke, when you go to somebody's house that smokes, it stinks. So I didn't want that. So I would always go outside to smoke cigarettes. So one night, I had gone outside to smoke cigarettes, and it was a nice night. I mean, it was a nice big moon out. It was very well lit outside. It was a perfect summer evening for standing outside and smoking a cigarette. So I'm outside smoking, and from the spot where I was standing right beside my porch, I could look up and I could see my barn. Now my barn is somewhere between 50 and 60 or 70 yards away from my porch. And up there beside the barn, I saw a very large shape that was standing right next to a tree that is directly beside my barn. Now, when I first saw this shape, I believed that it was a bear that was standing up on its hind legs and trying to get to something in the tree. because the creature's head was almost touching the bottom limb of the tree. Now the bottom limb of the tree, and I can tell you this because I measured it the next day, the bottom limb of the tree was just under 12 foot tall. It was just under 12 foot to get to the bottom limb of that tree. And the creature's head was almost touching it. It was like within inches of touching it. So I thought it was a very large bear that was standing on its hind legs at the tree. Now my wife was going to be coming home from work. She worked evenings and she would be home in about an hour, hour and a half from the time that I was standing there smoking. So I did not want my wife to come home, get out of the car in the dark, and walk, up to the porch and go into the house with a big giant bear standing up there. I didn't want the bear in the area because I was worried that something would happen to my wife. So I decided that what I was going to do was I was going to scare this bear away. Now, I always have my .357 Magnum on me at all times. Now, at that time I did not carry a weapon. So I did not have a gun on my side like I do now. But one thing I know about bears is if you make a lot of noise and you make yourself appear very large and you hoop and holler and yell, as long as they're not protecting their cubs, they will almost always just turn and run away. So what I figured I would do is I would start running towards the bear, hooping and hollering, and spreading my arms out as far as they could and waving them around. Now, I am 6'4", almost 300 pounds. I'm a very large individual. Okay, I'm not a fat guy, I'm a big guy. So I'm an intimidating character anyway. Maybe not to a bear, but when I spread my arms out, my wingspan is over 6 foot. So I appear, when I spread my arms out, way bigger than I actually am. And I'm big to start off with. So I figured what I would do was I would run towards this bear, hooping and hollering, making all kinds of racket, and it would just turn around and run away. No problem. So that's what I do. I start jogging up towards the barn. I'm not running fast because I don't want to get to the bear. I want the bear to run away before I get there. But I'm moving towards it at a slow jog, and I'm yelling and screaming, and I'm waving my arms, and I'm just making a hell of a lot of noise to try to frighten the bear away. Now, when a bear is standing on its hind legs at a tree like that, when it goes to run away, what happens is the bear drops down to all fours, and it turns and it hauls ass. I've seen it a bunch of different times in the woods. I've seen that exact scenario happen, to where a bear is standing up on its hind legs and it's messing with something on a tree, it's clawing it, it's doing, rubbing against it, whatever it's doing, and it hears you coming and sees you, and it drops down to all fours, turns around and runs away. It's happened to me on multiple occasions in the woods where that's happened. That's exactly what I was expecting to see as I made my way towards the bear, hooping and hollering and waving my arms. But that's not what happened. What happened was this thing leaned forward and looked at me. And it looked at me for several seconds, as if to figure out what the hell I was and what I was doing. Then the creature decided that it was just going to leave. So it turned around and ran away. Now notice I said it turned around and ran away. It did not drop down to all fours. It turned around and ran away on 2 feet like I do, on 2 legs. It ran. It didn't drop down on all fours and run. It ran on 2 legs. Now I have never in my life seen or heard of any kind of bear that is able to sprint away on two legs. They can take a few steps on two legs, but they can't run really fast that way. This thing turned around and hauled ass on two legs. Now, when I saw this, I knew almost immediately that I was not dealing with a bear. I knew that it was something else. Now, believe it or not, my first thought was not Bigfoot. My first thought was that there was an intruder on my property. There was a person standing next to my barn, is what I thought. And this alarmed me, because I do not live in town. I live in the mountain. So to get onto my property is no easy task. You can't simply be walking and say, oh man, whoops, I'm sorry, I walked onto your property. That doesn't happen in my house. I don't live around other people. So if somebody is on my property, then they have come there for a specific purpose. And at that time of night, it can't be good. So my first thought is, once I see this thing running away on two legs, is, oh shit, there's a person next to my barn. So no longer am I in scare the bear away mode. Now my mind shifts, and I'm going to catch this guy and beat the ever-loving hell out of him mode. Okay? So I run as fast as I can possibly run. I'm going to catch this guy. Now, right past my barn, about 10 to 15 yards, I would say, past my barn, there is a fence and a gate. Because at one time I had cattle, and the cows lived in that field, behind that gate and that fence. So it took me maybe 10 seconds to get up past the barn where I could see the gate. It didn't take very long, because remember, I was already jogging towards the tree in the barn at the time. So it didn't take very long at all for me to close that distance and get to where that person was. Now, like I said, it was a very moonlit night, and I could see very well. I got past the barn up to the gate. What I expected to see was a person running across my field, because in the amount of time it took me to get there, he would have had time to climb over the gate and maybe make it 10 or 15 yards past it before I got there and could see him. What I saw instead was the same weird, hairy, furry looking creature that I saw standing by the tree. I saw that creature jumping over the other fence on the other side of the field and disappearing into the woods. On the other side of that fence, there's woods, and it leads into the mountains. So there is nothing back there other than wilderness at the time. Now it's not exactly like that, because there's been a lot of stuff that's built in the area. So now it would have an opportunity to get to houses and stuff. But at the time, it was nothing but woods and mountain. Now that field is probably at least 200 yards long. At least. So whatever this thing was, when I started running towards it, it started looking at me, and then it decided to run away. As soon as it started running away, I sprinted after it, because I thought it was a human being. In the time it took me to cover the 10 or 15 yards to get there, to that gate, it had crossed about 200 yards of field and was jumping across the other fence when I got to the fence to see it. Now, no human being that I know of can cover that kind of distance in that kind of time. So right away I was like, oh my God, what the hell did I just see? That couldn't have been a person, because I've never seen anybody that can travel that fast. So then I decide that I'm going to go back inside, and I'm going to wait for my wife to come home, and I was going to walk out and meet her at the car and walk her in to make sure she's okay and safe. Because I still don't exactly know what the hell had happened. You know what I mean? I thought I saw a bear, But then it ran away on 2 legs, so it had to be human, but yet it did something that no human being could do, so I didn't know what the hell I was dealing with. That's the first time that the idea that it might have been a Bigfoot crossed my mind. But Bigfoot isn't really something that you hear of a lot here in Virginia. Usually it's in the Pacific Northwest. So I thought, this is kind of strange. But either way, I'm going to make sure my wife gets in safe, so that's what I do. Now the next morning, I get up, and I decide I'm going to go have a look around the area where I saw this thing and see if there's anything to see. See if it left behind any hair, any evidence of any kind. So I walk back up to the barn, and I'm looking around. And there's not a lot to see, really. It hadn't been real rainy out, so the ground was hard. So there really wasn't any tracks to be seen. So I decided what I was going to do was I was going to get my tape measure, and I was going to measure from the ground to the bottom limb and see how tall it was. Because that would give me a basic idea of what I was dealing with as far as how big the creature was. Now, to me, when I was looking at it, it looked huge. I mean, let's face it, I thought it was a bear. So it was gigantic. It was very tall, and it was very wide. That's the other thing. It was incredibly wide. That's why I thought it was a bear. I've never seen a person, ever, that's been that big. Even if you're talking about somebody like a Batista or a Brock Lesnar, which are huge individuals, big, wide, muscular, strong guys, they're nowhere near as big as this thing was. So I decide I'm going to measure. So I get my tape measure out, and I measure from the ground to the bottom limb. And it comes up to almost 12 foot. Just under, a couple inches under 12 foot. And that's when I knew that it was definitely not a man that I saw. Because it's rare that you even see a person that's 7 foot tall. Maybe if you go to an NBA game, you might see 1 or 2. But it almost never happens in real life, just normal everyday life, where you see a normal human being that is that tall. You definitely never see anybody that's 12 foot tall, or even 11 foot tall. So I knew that it was not a person. So I thought, what the hell did I just see? It couldn't have been a human being, because no human being is that big. You're definitely not going to have just some random intruder that comes onto your property that's going to be 11 foot tall. It's just not going to happen. So I knew that it wasn't a person. The way it ran away, I knew it couldn't have been a bear. So I was left wondering, what in the hell did I see? So as I've thought about it, and as I've measured and I've looked, the only thing I can think that it could have been was a Bigfoot. Now, notice one thing about this story that I just told you. I'm not telling you I hung out with a Bigfoot. I'm not telling you that me and Bigfoot are pals and, we go play bingo on Sunday night. I'm just telling you what I saw. And I can't even 100% say that it was a Bigfoot that I saw, because I don't know for sure. But what I can say is Bigfoot is the only thing that fits to me. I don't know what else it could have been. Because literally when I sat there and watched that thing, its head was an inch, maybe 2 inches below that branch. I mean, you couldn't see air in between. You couldn't see a space in between that creature's head and that bottom branch. Either it was touching it or it was just an inch or 2 below it. I figured it was an inch or 2 below it because nothing in its right mind is going to stand underneath a branch if their head is hitting it. That's not going to be comfortable. So that's why I thought it had to be an inch or 2 underneath. But I mean, it was so close that it might have been just barely touching it. So it had to have been at least 11 and a half feet tall. At least. Which is well taller than any human being on record. And no bear can run that kind of distance on 2 legs. It just doesn't happen. So to me, the only thing it could have been is a Bigfoot. I mean, I don't know what else it could have been. So in my mind, I saw a Bigfoot. And when I put that sighting that I personally had, when I put that with the muscle movements and the knee movements and the dermal ridges from the Patterson-Gimlin film, and I put that with the dermal ridges that are found on the actual plaster of Paris tracks, when I add all that stuff up, to me, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that Bigfoot is a real creature and that it absolutely exists. And I think that most likely what Bigfoot is the Gigantopithecus. I really honestly believe that's what we're dealing with here. So that's what I think it is, and that's my ruling on it. Old boy, what do you have to say? Do you believe it actually exists, and what do you believe it is?
I think it's an ancestor of what you just said, Gigantopithecus. I think it's not as big. It's not the same thing. They were bigger and meaner. I think they were an ancestor, or they have to be some kind of ancestor. There's a possibility they're ancestors to us too, or they're alien, or they're from another dimension. But I believe what you saw was real. It's kind of crazy you're saying it's 11 feet, because that doesn't, even with Bigfoot, it doesn't fit that size, because at the largest I've read, 10.5 feet. So that was kind of crazy. You said 11 and a half. But it's not impossible.
Yeah, it absolutely fits, because there's been Bigfoot that are sightings that are on record of in excess of 12 to 13 feet.
Well, what I've read is the average is 6.5 to 9.5 feet tall. That's what the majority of what people say they see. But there has been a couple sightings of 10 to 12 feet tall creatures. But it was probably a Sasquatch you've seen. I believe they're a different kind of creature, though. I think they're smarter than their ancestors. And they're a little bit smaller, too. They're not as big, because shit, I'm sorry, you probably would see a 15'8" running around. It weighed a ton, because they attack people. But these things are older than us anyway, so they've learned to adapt. They evolved, just like we do. So I believe you're probably right. I'm not going to argue that theory. I believe that they're probably an ancestor or of that of the creature. But I totally agree with you. Probably, and I believe it's about 100% fact that they're real. And I'll say yes, they exist. 100%. What about you?
Okay, so that puts us both in the yes column, and it puts us both at 100% yes. So I think that's a pretty definitive ruling. We are about out of time for the show. Old boy, do you want to go ahead and give some shout outs before we sign off?
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to our listeners. Next week's going to be a treat, because we have Sal Hernandez from CTX Media did Dread Time Stories. He's going to be on the show, so you guys, that would be a treat to listen in. I want to thank everybody for listening to us. Unearthed Films, Marcus Cook, 8 the Chosen One will be on soon in a couple weeks, so I can't wait for that. Check out Songs of Solomon. Awesome movie. It's coming out, the 3rd installment of American Guinea Pig. And they're making a 4th one. I think it's called Sacrifice. That's coming out too. That's going to be even crazier. I think I think it's part of the American Guinea Pig. I don't know. It's a movie. Another one's called Sacrifice. Check that out too. And love your life. You only get one. So good night, Sugar Ladies, Misfits, and Demon Hunters. Have a great night. I love you.
Yeah, next show we do next week is going to be, we're going to have Sal Hernandez on as our guest from STX Media. And like Old Boy said, he's the one who did Dread Time Stories and a bunch of other really cool movies. So that's going to be a really cool show. I want to give a shout out also to Unearthed Films. I want to give a shout out to Valley Vapors in Woodstock, Virginia, for all that they do for the troops. I appreciate you guys. I want to thank everybody for listening, and I hope you guys enjoyed this show. Bigfoot has always been one of my absolute favorite subjects. I mean, we're into a lot of the different paranormal stuff. We really like it. And for me, a lot of this stuff started with Bigfoot. Bigfoot was one of the very first out of the ordinary kind of creatures that I ever became involved with and ever started studying. It kind of got me into the whole world of the paranormal, because to me it was fascinating, the idea of this humongous creature that was able to walk around and avoid detection for so long by humans, you know. And like Old Boy was saying before, I mean, there's just so many sightings. And let's just take a small sampling real quick. If you have 100,000 sightings, now I know there's way more than that, but let's just use 100,000 because it's an easy number. If you have 100,000 sightings of something, and let's say that 90% of the people that have claimed to have seen this creature are just absolutely full of crap. Let's say that they're complete hoaxes, they're fakes, they're a bunch of drunken morons, they're just making it all up, okay? 90% of them. That still leaves 10% that are true. And that's still 10,000 eyewitness reports that are believable, that aren't making it up. Now, when you extrapolate that and you become 1 million or more sightings, that number rises up to 100,000 or more. You know what I mean? That are 100% verifiable, that are people that are respected people, that aren't crackpots, that it's not a hoax. And to me, that says there's something there. You know what I mean? And that always really amazed me, and it really blew me away. And that's what kind of got me started on this journey as a very small child. And I kind of owe my entire life in the paranormal, all the research I've done, all the things I know, I kind of owe all of that to Bigfoot, because that's the first thing that really grabbed my attention and made me want to study this stuff, that made me want to do this for a living. Nessie came along shortly after. I really dug her too, but Bigfoot was the beginning for me. So this has been a very cool show to do, and one of my favorite subjects. So I hope you guys enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed doing the show. I want to say thank you. If you're watching this right now on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. And please check out some of the other shows, because we've done shows on all kinds of different, very interesting, very cool subjects. And I think you guys will really like them. So check those out. And just thank you so much for all your support, and thank you for listening. And until we speak again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. We love you. Bye-bye.